When it comes to indie games, the kind of ones that bring back a specific style, it not only invokes memories of older games, but makes you appreciate their presence, like a spirit being reincarnated in another body. You can see it in recent titles like Lunacid or Delusion, or even games like Dreamwild, that takes both low poly style graphics from something like the PS1 era, but also adds in pre-rendered backgrounds as well. A lot of these indie games today are a reflection of the 90s melting pot, where each year not only yielded something new, as well as exciting things coming along the way, but they would also span a golden era in creativity and memorable video game experiences. We had strategy, RPGs, FPSs, immersive sims, and even MMOs flooding the market. It was genuinely one of the best eras to come out because each year showed a future that was coming true. Each poly count added up. The refinements in mechanics became more noticeable, and the breakthroughs in development becoming more impactful. As of today, we've come full circle for the past decade or so, going from 8-bit to 32-bit inspired games, but with modern controls and hardware. And the best part is, it's easier than it's ever been before to make your own game with the tools and resources available now. People can now make their own PS1 inspired game, or their own indie MMO. Anything that comes to mind, provided that you have the time and patience for it, it can be done. And each period has their own games that make a huge impact of their own, which has been seen many times in the indie scene, like Vampire Survivors for instance. This was a game that I recently talked about, but to quickly summarize, it's a roguelike based wave game where you obtain items and kill enemies for 30 minutes. It takes the horde based modes from other games and adds a roguelike twist to it. It was a huge success that then spawned an entire genre of its own, called survivor-likes. Some people have also referred to them as bullet heavens or reverse bullet hell games. It's sort of like Toho or Ikaruga, but you're the one shooting millions of balls at once at the enemies, rather than the other way around. Many games like Vampire Survivors would do the same thing essentially, but with their own twists, and some other hitters like Brotato, Death Must Die, as well as 20 Minutes Till Dawn, have established their own place. But now the genre is becoming more saturated, which makes it more difficult to identify the more unique titles out of the mix. There's only so many times you can play another Vampire Survivors clone before you tune out and just move on. But sometimes, a game that is pretty similar may still catch my eye. Halls of Torment was a game that did just that, but for one specific reason, and that reason was Diablo. Diablo is one of my favorite franchises, and one that is also divisive thanks to the releases like 3 and 4, but 1 and 2 are not only masterpieces in game design, but are also revolutionary in how much they impacted the industry. The Diablo titles were like Doom but for RPG fans, slaying demons in dark labyrinths with swords, arrows, and magic. 1 was a really fucking hard game, but also a satisfying one for its time. 2 upped the scale and geared it more towards hack and slash, loot-based gameplay, which would heavily influence the action RPG genre for a good while. This era of Blizzard was them at their absolute best, when you would get other releases like Warcraft 3, StarCraft Brood War, the first couple of World of Warcraft expansions. This was peak Blizzard, including with releases like Diablo 1 and 2. When you would get wind of a new Blizzard game coming out, you knew that it was going to be fucking awesome. But times have changed, and nowadays we get mixed bags, and they're definitely not what they used to be, and haven't been for a very long time. The Diablo titles themselves were highly replayable, not to mention moddable. Even the first game has a mod with over 20 classes, which is insane. I personally liked 3, but I really did not like the art style, and 4 is something that I've yet to try out. 1 and 2 though still hold up fairly well, and I always enjoy playing them. But with 1, I would recommend using a modern source port like Delusion if you want to get into it to have a more enjoyable experience, or at the very least a HD patch for more visual clarity. Halls of Torment immediately reminded me of Diablo 1 and 2 with its similar pre-rendered backdrops, or something you would see during the Infinity Engine's golden age. But that's where the similarities end, because this game is pretty much like Vampire Survivors with its own twists and turns. It's one of the many survivor-likes that have popped up on Steam, and it certainly won't be the last as long as there's interest. At any rate, I looked for other similar games to Vampire Survivors and stumbled upon this one. Like I had said, the 90s-centric visuals like you would see in Diablo or Baldur's Gate got me intrigued to try this game out. I loaded it up and selected the character with only a pair of pants and a sword and got started right away. I played the game as if it was Vampire Survivors, killing enemies, collecting gems, leveling up and selecting abilities, you know, the usual stuff. It was like playing a game I had played thousands of times before, and if you'd come from Vampire Survivors and other similar titles, then you know what you're getting into. At the same time though, there are some distinctions that I've noticed beyond the graphics. For starters, you have more manual control over your ability to fight. Once again, items are passive, but your main attack can be aimed with the mouse, allowing for specific target selections, as well as turning auto attack off so you can left click like it's Diablo. You also have item builds, and not necessarily the ones that give passive attacks, but things like chest pieces, gloves, boots, rings, or amulets. They collectively give the player big advantages that become essential for the weaker characters when they traverse the later halls. So far, the game has about 5 distinct halls that act as the game's levels. They have their own unique enemies, with some that carry over, their own bosses, and of course their own Lord boss. In Vampire Survivors, you face Death at the end, who quickly kills you unless you cheese him somehow. But in this game, the final bosses are challenging but are actually manageable to beat. When you narrow down their attack patterns, your chances of winning are usually pretty good. Visually, the game has a lot more going on, in comparison to something like Vampire Survivors. The developers of Halls of Torment did a fantastic job of recreating the pre-rendered styled visuals that you would see in 90s isometric games like Diablo or Baldur's Gate. Environments have a ton of atmosphere and the enemies are interesting in their designs. The bosses are also another highlight too. While their behaviour isn't that much different compared to the enemies, their presentation is unique and fits each environment. You could be fighting skeleton lords in one level, demonic butchers in the next one, three-headed dragons in the third, and so on. The game's visual retro flair is a lot more interesting to look at because there's a lot more going on. The goal is relatively simple. You fight waves of enemies and bosses for 30 minutes, then one of the lords will show up, basically being like the final boss of the level. Beating the lord will complete the stage, or if you survive long enough, you may unlock the next stage. In between the progression that you make throughout each hall, you'll unlock new characters and earn gold that you can then use to buy upgrades for certain stats or buy items that you can retrieve from the well, which you get by freeing an NPC that's in the second level. The loop of repeating halls, grinding XP, gold, obtaining new items and completing quests is what will take up your time in this game. It's designed so that you're not necessarily in a rush to beat it. There are only 5 levels, but those 5 levels are highly replayable because of the potential item builds that you can create, as well as the various characters that you can play as, the different ability paths that can make your characters overpowered and so on. It's part of what makes the survivor-like games fun and addicting sometimes, the constant feedback of getting stronger and seeing large numbers multiply every minute you play. Each character has a defined playstyle, and each one has certain advantages over the other. Cleric's damage is insane when it comes to melting single enemies. It can be great for clearing bosses really quickly when they're alone, but the Cleric's damage output gets split for each enemy that's hit. Exterminator doesn't really have crit, but has great AoE and rate of fire, setting large mobs on fire, and with Flame Strike and other abilities, you can turn yourself into a killing machine long before the final boss even shows up. Eventually though, you'll be able to have a more complete build, including marks that you can select from one of the other characters after completing certain objectives, which comes in the form of Agony Mode. When you complete a stage, you also unlock Agony Mode for that hall. It is basically a harder version of the typical run that you do. Every enemy that you kill increases the Agony meter, and enemies that are alive bring it down. And as you wipe out more mobs, the Agony level will go up and will make the level much harder, which will also invite champion-like enemies that have a lot more health and do more damage. Killing them leads to gold drops or new items to pick up that are pretty powerful. Early on, you'll probably struggle with this mode due to lack of certain items or upgrades that you haven't gotten yet, but over time, the game does somewhat become easier. The more upgrades and unlocked items you have, the more advantages you can give yourself during a run. And people have already figured out how to come up with some crazy builds that make the game seem really easy when you look at it. But that's part of the charm when it comes to these type of games, seeing the infinite potential of getting more powerful and seeing it materialize on screen. It's the kind of feeling you can also get in loot-based games like Diablo, where the desire to increase the numbers becomes a grind in itself, but one that pays off eventually. However, this game does eventually get a little bit stale. Personally though, I haven't reached the full point of it being completely stale, but I can imagine it being an occurrence when you've obtained every achievement or after you've done like countless runs. There's not really a lot of substance to the game, and it's a shame really. Let me explain. From the game's atmosphere and setting, I can tell that there's a lot of potential here to expand it. Like in the Diablo games, you have books that you can find that add more lore to the existing story. But in this game, the books that you find have text that's just way too cryptic, and without the pretext to what you're doing and why, it's like reading the last chapter of a book without starting from the beginning. The setting itself, again, is really cool. It has that dark fantasy vibe like in Diablo, but all I'm left with is the visual scenery, which is great, but I would still like to explore more of the story side of things, which there really isn't much of to begin with. The NPC dialogue and their up-close designs are also really neat, but it just boils down to, this is what I do and here's how you can use my services. The setting and the game makes me want to learn its world a little bit more, and that's a really good sign of a well-made game. But in this one, I'm left with just breadcrumbs here. Maybe with future content updates, they could add some story elements or more lore to expand the setting, but for now, there's really not much to say about the story itself other than that you just have these lords that you defeat. Each lord represents a hall. You survive for 30 minutes, the lord shows up and then you kill him, and then that's it. That's all I've been able to gather so far. Other than that, the music is pretty decent. Nothing substantial, but it works well within the confines of the game. It's not as catchy as the music in Vampire Survivors, but it's more fitting. You have more foreboding ambience and Diablo-esque tunes, like you're about to go into a dungeon and are hoping for a town portal scroll drop. That kind of music, basically. Sound effects I can't get enough of. The skeletons dropping on the ground is what makes me keep coming back to some of the levels in this game. Getting an AoE-based scroll just to make dozens of bones rattling is really satisfying. They did a fantastic job on engineering the sound to make you sort of hooked for that 30 minutes of playtime. In summary, the 90s style graphics are great, the atmosphere is pretty spot on, the gameplay is fun in short bursts, the characters are all unique and have their own playstyles, the enemies and the boss designs are also fantastic. The game has a lot going for it, and to be honest, I enjoy it a lot more than Vampire Survivors. But the game also has some missed potential that could still be realized in future updates. Its setting is cool, but I wish there was more to discover, like at the very least more books with voice lines or more decade canes, or even a callback to the Butcher character would be cool, just to rub in the Diablo-inspired vibe. I suppose what I'm wanting is something that's, I guess, hasn't really been focused on as much, or isn't very important in this particular genre, where the focus is more on replayability and simple but addicting gameplay loops. But my wishes do also come from the fact that since the developers did such a great job with the visual presentation as well as adding in some Diablo callbacks, or at least that's what I've gathered, I could really see them evolving this game into something that's more than just another Vampire Survivors type of game, because we already have enough of those. It would honestly be pretty cool if we could see these guys make another game with the same kind of graphics as this game, but with the gameplay or rich world building of Diablo 1 and 2 in a modern take. Regardless though, Halls of Torment is still a fantastic game that is a bit short on the mileage when it comes to replayability, but is definitely worth its asking price. If you're a fan of either Diablo or Vampire Survivors, then this is a no-brainer. I look forward to seeing what the developers of this game do next, whether it's more content or if they make a new game that's a more realized version of this game. Either way, I'll be keeping tabs. Stay tuned and thank you for watching.